Welcome to the Chris Levels Show, Politics and Prophecy. He will share with you his theme of living life based on principles and not feelings. It's time for a return to our Judeo-Christian roots of laws and repent from the progressive liberal philosophy of what's convenient and feels good at the moment. Join him as he uncovers and exposes the spiritual wickedness that is robbing us of our inheritance that Jesus Christ promised us as a nation if we are obedient to his ways. Here's the host of the show, Chris Levels.
Hello, my name is Chris Levels, and I am the host of Politics and Prophecy. Today I'm going to share an article with you by Tyler Durden, and it's called America's Reign of Terror. A nation reaps what it sows. And I don't think you can find another nation on this planet today who exemplifies that truth more than America, as we shall see in this article. I agree with basically 100% of it in terms of what we're seeing today from our politicians, from our educators, although that's really a stupid term to use, indoctrinators. I don't understand why people would go into that profession today in America without having understood the role of the NEA, otherwise known as the National Educators Association, and the role they play in dumbing down the youth of America today, the pushing of satanic, demonic agendas on the youth today, and the fact that they are not making a difference in terms of leading young minds into truth and righteousness, but are part of the machine that is guiding them into darkness and wickedness. But we talk about our military. I am former military. I'm former U.S. Navy in the submarine force. And obviously I must have had great regard for what I was taught my country stood for when I enlisted and volunteered to go into the submarine portion of our armed forces. Today, there is no way in the world that if I had a son, I would allow him to, well, I guess I couldn't stop him. I wouldn't persuade him. I wouldn't encourage him to go into the military because of the fact that it is not a force for good. We are destroying the lives of countless innocent people for no reason whatsoever except for the greed and the ultimate plan of people that we will never see, people that we don't even know about. It's ridiculous. And yet you have these veterans, these young men and women coming back disabled physically as well as emotionally. It serves no purpose. And I should go back and say that again. It doesn't serve God's purpose. It does serve Satan's purpose. So I can't say it doesn't serve a purpose, because it actually does. So let me get on with this article. Again, it's called America's Reign of Terror, A Nation Reaps What It Sows. And in a quote from James Madison, he says, "The means of defense against foreign danger have been always the instruments of tyranny at home. Who designed the malware worm that is now wreaking havoc on tens of thousands of computers internationally by hackers demanding a king's ransom? The U.S. government. Who is the biggest black market buyer and stockpiler of cyber weapons? Weaponized malware that can be used to hack into computer systems, spy on citizens, and destabilize vast computer networks. You guessed it, the U.S. government. What country has one of the deadliest arsenals of weapons of mass destruction? I'll give you one clue. The U.S. government. Who is the largest weapons manufacturer and exporter in the world, such that they are literally arming the world? The U.S. government. Which is the only country to ever use a nuclear weapon in wartime? One guess. The United States. How did Saddam Hussein build Iraq's massive arsenal of tanks, planes, missiles, and chemical weapons during the 1980s? with help from the U.S. government. Who gave who gave Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda access to a fortune in covert funding and top level combat weaponry? The U.S. government. What country has a pattern and practice of entrapment that involves targeting vulnerable individuals, feeding them with the propaganda, know-how, and weapons intended to turn them into terrorists, and then arresting them as part of an elaborately orchestrated counterterrorism sting? The U.S. government. Where did ISIS get many of their deadliest weapons, including assault rifles and tanks, to anti-missile defenses? The U.S. government. Which country has a history of secretly testing out dangerous weapons and technologies on its own citizens? The U.S. government. I think he should include in that part, as far as asking the question, testing out bioweapons on their own citizens. Everything from the Tuskegee experiments, where they put syphilis in black men without them knowing it and watching the symptoms. Everything from MK Ultra and subjecting military veterans to LSD experiments. Man, I'm glad these people are looking out for us. Are you getting the picture yet? The U.S. government isn't protecting us from terrorism. The U.S. government is creating the terror. It is, in fact, the source of the terror. Just think about it for a minute. Almost every tyranny being perpetrated against the citizenry, purportedly to keep us safe and the nation secure, has come about as a result of some threat manufactured in one way or another by our own government. Cyber warfare, terrorism, biochemical attacks, the nuclear arms race, surveillance, the drug wars. In almost every instance, the U.S. government has, in its typical Machiavellian fashion, sown the seeds of terror domestically and internationally in order to expand its own totalitarian powers. It's time to wake up and stop being deceived by government propaganda. We're not dealing with a government that exists to serve its people, protect their liberties, and ensure their happiness. Rather, these are the diabolical machinations of a make-works program carried out on an epic scale, whose only purpose is to keep the powers that be permanently, not to mention profitably, employed. Case in point, for years now, the U.S. government has been creating what one intelligence insider referred to as a cyber army capable of offensive attacks, as Reuters reported back in 2013. Even as the U.S. government confronts rival powers over widespread internet espionage, it has become the biggest buyer in a burgeoning gray market where hackers and security firms sell tools for breaking into computers. The strategy is spurring concern in the technology industry and intelligence community that Washington is in effect encouraging hacking and failing to disclose to software companies and customers the vulnerabilities exploited by the purchased hacks. That's because U.S. intelligence and military agencies aren't buying the tools primarily to fend off attacks. Rather, they are using the tools to infiltrate computer networks overseas, leaving behind spy programs and cyber weapons that can disrupt data or damage systems. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Snowden, the information that he revealed, backed all of this up. He exposed all of this, and yet you still have nitwits here in the United States that think he's some kind of spy or think he's working against the interest of American citizens. That's how much mind control they have over people. As I continue, as part of this cyber weapons programs, government agencies such as the NSA have been stockpiling all kinds of nasty malware, viruses, and hacking tools that can steal financial account passwords, turn an iPhone into a listening device, or in the case of Stuxnet, sabotage a nuclear facility. And now we learn that the NSA is responsible for the latest threat posed by the WannaCry or WannaDecryptor malware worm, which, as a result of hackers accessing the government's arsenal, has hijacked more than 57,000 computers and crippled healthcare, communications, infrastructure, logistics, and government entities in more than 70 countries already. All the while, the government was repeatedly warned about the dangers of using criminal tactics to wage its own cyber wars. It was warned about the consequences of blowback should its cyber weapons get into the wrong hands. The government chose to ignore the warnings. That's exactly how the 9/11 attacks unfolded. Well, I guess I did say I agreed with 100%. Well, we're going to knock that down to 99% based on that last statement. First, the government helped to create the menace that was Al-Qaeda. And then when bin Laden had left the nation reeling in shock, despite countless warnings that fell on tone-deaf ears, it demanded and was given immense new powers in the form of the USA Patriot Act in order to fight the very danger it created. Okay, well, that's his prerogative to believe that bin Laden was the one behind 9/11. I can't hold that against him. The rest of the article is pretty right on. This has become the shadow government's modus operandi. Regardless of which party controls the White House, the government creates a menace, knowing full well the ramifications such a danger might pose to the public. Then, without ever owning up to the part it played in unleashing that particular menace on an unsuspecting populace, it demands additional powers in order to protect we the people from the threat. Now, what happens with a lot of people is that they like to, as he puts it in this way, they don't detail the depth of the evil that these people in government are imposing. They act like there's unintended consequences, when in reality what's being played out is the Hegelian dialectic. This is not just unintended consequences when things like this go wrong. Obamacare, if you think that they didn't know that it was going to fail, then please, please, please allow me to sell you some drinking water from Flint, Michigan. Please, I beg of you. Because they do know. I can show you their white papers. I can show you the documentation as far as their plans that they've had for over 100 years. Whether you talk about the CFR when it was formed after they couldn't get the United Nations going, and the Federal Reserve Act, all of this control stuff that was going on. It's been going on for a long time. Not since Obama came into office, way before him. Okay, here we go. Yet the powers that be don't really want us to feel safe. They want us cowering and afraid and willing to relinquish every last one of our freedoms in exchange for their phantom promises of security. As a result, it's the American people who pay the price for the government's insatiable greed and quest for power. We're the ones to suffer the blowback. The definition of blowback, a term originating from within the American intelligence community, denoting the unintended consequences, unwanted side effects, or suffered repercussions of a covert operation that fall back on those responsible for the aforementioned operations. It's also interesting to know that the CIA, Central Intelligence Community, or Agency, were the ones that, if they didn't originate the term conspiracy theorist, they sure utilized it to shut down anybody who would question their version of events, starting with the Warren Report when they murdered JFK and didn't want people looking into it or questioning it. Those that did, a lot of them at that time, got their tickets punched into eternity. As I continue, as historian Chalmers Johnson explains, blowback is another way of saying that a nation reaps what it sows. Unfortunately, we the people are the ones who keep reaping what the government sows. We're the ones who suffer every time, directly and indirectly, from the blowback. We're made to pay trillions of dollars in blood money to a military-industrial complex that kills without conscience. We've been saddled with a crumbling infrastructure, impoverished cities, and a faltering economy while our tax dollars are squandered on lavish military installations and used to prop up foreign economies.